Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Athlete CEO Podcast. I'm your host, Erik Averill, and I am joined by our resident director of peak performance, the owner of all things performance, Josiah Igono. And we are going to jump right back into our monthly conversation around unlocking your full potential of your human capital. And today we get to dive into a fun conversation about arousal regulation. Kind of seems like an intense word right there. Get a little laugh out of you. But for our listeners, what is arousal regulation?
Yeah, first of all, thanks again for having me. When you start talking about arousal regulation in terms of the performance context, more specifically with athletes, athletes always seem to play right at a certain level, an optimal level. Whereas if you use a number system, right, so to speak, one being pretty mellow, pretty chill, 10 being like a Dennis Rodman type of guy, you know what I'm saying? Every player, every athlete typically plays at a certain level. And when you look at arousal regulation, there is a certain level of performance, a certain level of challenge whereby certain athletes, upregulate or downregulate depending on the situation to help them perform optimally. And so the last thing I'll say about this before we get into our conversation is that the majority of mental skills are designed to help us downregulate. Another word for that is to calm down, to ease up. Very few of the mental skills are designed to help us upregulate. Powerful stuff.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And what you're saying, I hear so much of the work, right? Breath work, meditation. A lot of times it is of how do I bring myself down, whether it's after a game or in an intense situation. How do I bring myself back to a present moment, to that calmness? But what you're saying, that arousal regulation, the uptick is so important, right? I think about peaking for a competition or an opportunity. And maybe you're going to get into this. I think one of the unhealthy things that we know, whether it's in the professional world, in the business office, or on the athletic field, I think a lot of the ways we're getting there is artificially, right? Caffeine, stimulants, these type of things. Because what we're trying to do is saying we have to introduce an external thing to try and get ourselves up. And maybe what you're about to walk us through is there are techniques to do that without introducing stimulants, whether those are good or bad. But yeah, very interested to hear this, because I think it is. So many of us want to know, like, how can I be at my best at a specific moment?
No, you bring up a very powerful point in terms of stimulants and external substances. That's a whole different conversation, but it's a big time business. You know what I'm saying? If I'm not mistaken, I think in the NCAA, they actually have thresholds, in terms of how much caffeine can be in your system, before and during your competition. No one's testing for them, but that's another subject. But when you look at like the inverted U theory, right, or catastrophe theory in psychology, you have challenges and you have performance, and when one exceeds the other, you get in trouble, right? What do I perceive as challenging, and how well can I perform, at that point? And in catastrophe theory says that every athlete, when you start going to that peak, right, and on that Y and X axes, every athlete has an optimal level. And when I pass that, I have a crash and or a catastrophe. So there are things that you can do, as you alluded to, mentally to help downregulate and upregulate. So let's talk about, upregulation. That's why we're here today, right? There are some simple things that you can do to upregulate. Now, the majority of players, when it hits 7:05 or when it hits kickoff time or opening tip, their heart rate is going. So they don't necessarily need help upregulating. But if you're a bullpen, pitcher, and you're coming in hot, like you have no idea you're pitching that night. They might have even told you, "Hey, dude, you're not pitching today." And all of a sudden that phone's ringing, they're doing this to you. You know what I'm saying? Like all of a sudden it's like, "Oh my gosh," right? So one thing that you can do, music is one area that individuals have used throughout the course of time to upregulate. So you'll hear guys listen to, heavy rock, hip hop, whatever it is to help get that heart rate up, that adrenaline going. Music is one. Command words is another one. Attack, focus, let's go. This is for this is for my hometown. This is for my mom. This is for my kids right here. Whatever it is that you deem as appropriate to upregulate, command words have been shown to help athletes upregulate. Um, Another one is cue images. Right, when we were all kids, we all had posters on our wall,
Yeah.
right? And so
Yeah.
you see certain imagery and you're just like, you see it and you're like, yeah, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some people use highlight videos, right? They'll watch highlight reels. Why does everybody get hype when they watch highlight videos? Why? No one in the history of mankind has ever watched a highlight video and say, I hope we get a win tonight. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, let's go, man. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
there's like, it's upregulation. Another area whereby, and you can have that on your phone. You can have those, on the walls, right? A lot of the clubhouses, locker rooms have been outfitted with this concept, and people don't even realize it. It's upregulation. You see somebody, hitting a home run. You see the emotion in a pitcher when he strikes somebody out. You see somebody, putting their hands up for a touchdown. Whatever the case may be, cue images are huge. And then the other area, the last area, which is when I share this, a lot of athletes, they start scratching their head and they're like, wait, what? But then they say, that makes a lot of sense. A simple warm-up. Right? Even during competition helps you to upregulate. You see it all the time. You see quarterbacks on the sideline throwing the ball. You see them on the bike. You see pitchers, throwing the medicine ball, doing band care, whatever the case, band work, whatever the case may be, jumping up and down. Do you know that simply jumping up and down, right, engages my central nervous system, my spine, my brain? It activates both the left and the right hemispheres of my brain. It gets my heart rate up. Just a simple up and down warm up does wonders for upregulation.
The reason I'm laughing is where we're taping this right now is in my office in Phoenix, and I'm pretty sure I'm on the 7th floor. The office underneath me on the 6th floor probably wonders what the heck happens about 3 or 4 times a day, because, and this isn't something I learned and you just explained to me what I was actually doing. I didn't even know I was doing, why I was doing it. But Brendan Bouchard in High Performance Habits,
Yes.
one of the things he says is he's up out of his seat every 50 minutes and has you bounce and close your eyes, quick little 2 minutes, 10 air squats, hold at the bottom, some push-ups, kind of hitting yourself, waking yourself up. And that is better than any cup of coffee
Yes.
I've ever had. And so one of the things that I'm thinking through of conversations being an athlete or even in the business world, right now there's such this movement, at least in the business world, of like stoicism. And I'm seeing these posts too by athletes. And one of the things, what I'm hearing differently is maybe a mistake is we don't have to be the same emotion for 24 hours a day, right?
No.
And so there's actually these tools and these cues of what is the appropriate, emotional response given what you're trying to achieve. And so this is super helpful of, I think, through a conversation I had with a performance coach, Phil Whalen, who owns Diesel Fitness in Tampa. I mean, he talks a lot about this of spiking your HRV through, a cold plunge or some of these type of things. This is really helpful. Can you, maybe talk about for the athlete that I think of, when are some other times that they maybe need to have the arousal regulation besides competition? Where else would you see maybe you should do this? Is it in the gym? Is it, where is it appropriate?
I would say, first of all, that's a great question. I would say during competition, lulls in competition when you're competing with your teammates. I would say through extended bouts of nothingness, right? Or just boredom, right? So if you're just, if you're doing something, if you're reading something, if you're on a long plane ride, long bus ride, immediately when you get off or when is appropriate, you can do that. Uh, sitting down for extended periods of time. These are all great times to be able to do that. And like you said, it's better than a cup of coffee. I mean, it gets your heart rate going. Your lymphatic system is innervated, and there's just all kinds of great benefits for that. And so, upregulation is huge. And to your point about stoicism, that's stoicism I think has its place. But at the end of the day, we're human beings. We all have emotion, and we need to be able to insert, right, and remove emotion when we need to, right? Uh, and again, this might be another podcast, but when you start talking about focus, there's not one pilot, there's not one surgeon, right, that when they're about to go in and do some work, they're like, all right, guys, let's go. Yeah. I don't want my surgeon doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I have to get operated on, I don't want my pilot doing that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Land the plane. You know what I mean? Just land that thing and we can get hype afterwards. You know what I'm saying? So we need to be able to insert and remove emotion as necessary, because we are human beings.
But on the flip side too, right? That fighter pilot or just pilot in general or surgeon, they're also not asleep at the wheel.
No.
Right?
No.
I think one of the things is being able to understand and recognize that your emotions in and of themselves aren't good or bad. It's just, are they appropriate for the given context? And I know we're going to talk about future things in future podcasts about maybe down regulation and when things are appropriate. But one of the key things that Josiah hit on that I want to make sure for our audience is we're trying to really press in, what does it mean to be fully human, right? We talk a lot about the greatest driver of your net worth is this human capital. And one of the biggest issues that we see is fragmentation. It's believing that we are not fully human, that we aren't mind, body, and soul. And that's also why you can't approach it with just, hey, do these 10 steps and that's for everybody. In previous podcasts, you've talked so much about the importance of starting with the heart before we can get to the head. And can you maybe just speak about that, of the importance of individualization when it comes to figuring out what works for each person when it comes to arousal regulation?
Yeah, at the end of the day, everybody's favorite subject is themselves. And the most important thing that they need is what they want, right? So I say that not flippantly, but it's the truth, right? And that speaks to individualization, and I think those experts, in industry who pay attention to that are going to succeed, because this world is trending towards individualization, and it's not a bad thing. It's just it's an intuitive thing, and it's what people want. People are smart. Okay. Like, people are smart. We're smarter now than we've ever been before. I'm not trying to dog the big networks, but you have ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox. You know what I'm saying? You had the big networks that got fragmented by a thing called the internet, right? Right. And then you had a thing called Twitter that fragmented it even more, right? And so people they go towards things that they are interested in. I got a chance to sit down several years ago with I think it was a news producer. And I asked him, I said, hey man, what is the trend right now in television? You know what he told me? He said, the trend is that everything is going to go a la carte. He goes, everybody is going to be able to choose what type of programming they want to watch. He told me this several years ago. And what are we seeing now? Streaming this. You got all these different versions of Disney, ESPN. I mean, how many versions of ESPN do you have? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, people can get their Fox News, Fox Sports. They can get ESPN Plus, Hulu, Vudu, Netflix. Like, it's all about individualization. And that approach is universal across the board, even when we're talking about our mental performance.
Yeah. And I think that's a great place to end right there. Is one of the things that we talk so much about on this podcast and internally at AWM. It's about ownership, right? It's about owning your wealth. It's about owning your career. It's about owning your development and your performance. And so for the professional athlete, it's building your own front office. And I think that this is what Josiah just hit on. It's the individualization, the customization, that we live in a time that you actually have the ability to customize your entire performance plan. And so whether it's arousal regulation or it's command words or it's what we're going to talk about in future podcasts, is the good news is it is available to you if you take ownership of your career. And so we appreciate your guys' attention. We hope that this has been valuable for you. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. If you have any questions, you have topics you would love for us to hit on, please head over to athleteceo.com. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, stay humble, stay hungry, and always be a pro.